Lenders will sometimes just give people what they ask for. So be careful what kind of loan program you ask for from the lender because you just might get it and you may not get the best version of what you could have had. So we had a client call us wanting to purchase a house in Fredericksburg. For you don't know, that's a wine country here in Central Texas. Everybody loves Fredericksburg. And he wanted to buy a secondary residence. Lives out in California, wants to put 10% down. Very interest rate, minded, like a lot of buyers are. So at first it was not so much about, planning and qualification. It was more about like, what's your interest rate? What's your funds to close? Which is kind of normal. I think when people are trying to compare lenders, they don't really know how to compare lenders. They can't see necessarily like, where's all the reviews? Where can I see what people say about you? They definitely can't see production numbers, like how many deals have you been a part of this year or last year? Like how long you've been doing this in business. So all they can know is like, what's my interest rate? And that's kind of how they gauge what lenders are. So talking to him about like, why do you want to buy a secondary residence? What's the most important thing? We try to have conversations with people about life. Like what's spurring this decision to be able to purchase a secondary residence? What's the plan? How long do we think we're going to have this property? Do we ever imagine living into it? Like, what's going to be going on in the next 3 to 5 years? And through learning about that, we discovered that, hey, he's actually going to be living in the house the majority of the time. He just thought that he would buy a secondary residence because he has a house in California, or more importantly, he lives in a home that his wife has a mortgage on in California. After talking to him about, okay, well, let's look at it. How much money do we want to put down? Because interest rates are important. And the issue with conventional loans is that they have adjustments to the interest rate depending upon the occupancy. So a primary residence interest rate is going to get a lot better interest rate than a secondary residence or an investment property. And in fact, second homes and investment properties have the same pricing adjustments. So putting 10% down on a secondary residence property is going to have a pretty high interest rate. And so he was kind of shocked about that because through talking with other lenders, they weren't as honest. They didn't quote the right stuff because they're not knowledgeable about the pricing. They just go off of what they think they know because, once again, can't really tell how long they've been in business. Can't really see what people say about them, can't see the production numbers of those other engines. So be careful with your online lenders or your big banks because they're not going to give you the right information up front because they're just not really listening to what you're saying. And so through talking to him, we learned about some of his qualifications and we learned, hey, he's VA eligible because he's in receipt of VA benefits and he also has Social Security. But we also learned that he's not the decision maker. Every time we would have a conversation with him, he would say, okay, that sounds great. I'm ready to go. Let's keep going. He would call back and be like, oh no, I have other questions. And we said, who's the other decision maker? And he's like, oh, my wife. Well, let's get her on the phone. We had a conversation with them, a Zoom call, and we were able to educate them on the VA home loan benefit. He didn't think that he could use it again. So we talked to them and said, hey, you're actually going to be living in this property 51% of the time. You actually are eligible to claim this property as your primary residence. Why don't we use your VA eligibility? Because the interest rate is going to be a ton better than a conventional loan. And so through discussing that with him, he said, yeah, that's a good idea. And so we used his VA home loan to be able to purchase this property. So just by having a few more questions and a real life conversation with the buyer, we were able to structure the loan in a different way that gave him a much lower principal and interest benefit and also gave him the ability to put no money down if he so choose. Now, we also knew that this property might have some repairs. We weren't 100% sure, but we knew that there might be some issues because the house had been vacant for a little bit. Now it's out in Fredericksburg, nobody's maintaining it. We didn't really understand what kind of condition because online the pictures typically only show you all the good parts of the house. We didn't know that there was holes in the walls and there was cabinets all torn up and there was trash in the front yard with big old holes and broken glass on the shed. Like there was about $10,000 worth of repairs that the VA said had to be done. They call them MPRs, minimum property requirements. You see, the VA really doesn't want a VA buyer to incur any additional expenses when they purchase the house, so they're pretty particular about the condition of the home, especially on the outside. So the appraiser appraised the property, and I'd like to say $50,000 higher than what the sales price was. So kudos to our realtor for going after and negotiating a hell of a deal and getting them that much equity, which is very rare in today's market. But the VA appraiser gave us a list about as long as my arm about these repairs that needed to be done. And the seller was not going to fix those things. And we knew the seller wasn't going to fix them because they told us the property is going to be as is. We had a conversation about the VA buyer and we said, okay, look, If this appraisal comes back and it's got some repairs on there, we're gonna have an issue, funding the loan without nobody fixing the house. So the plan is going to be, why don't we take some of your money, hold that money in order to fix the house, and we do what's called a lender required repair escrow. So lots of times if there's a property that has a little bit of help, we will hold 1.5 times the repair. We will put that money into escrow as long as those repairs are going to be fixed within 7 days of closing. So we did this all in cadence with the contractor. Our realtor partner had a good contractor that was going to be able to fix all the things that were wrong with the house. We needed a permanent heating source. I think there was a stove in the kitchen needed to be done. Those are all minimum property requirements. But we were able to close on the loan, pay the seller, immediately after funding, start doing the repairs. The VA buyer came into town, worked in cadence with the repair guys, got everything fixed, called me up on a Sunday, said, Joel, the house is all finished, send the appraiser. My processor ordered the appraiser. They went out there, gave us a final inspection. Now the property meets the minimum property requirements for VA. The seller's long gone, they got all their money. But I don't have a loan that I can sell yet. I don't have a loan that meets the guidelines for the secondary market. But because we trusted the buyer, they were in agreement with us that we were going to fund on this property, even with it being in need of repair. They did exactly what they said they were gonna do. We did what we were gonna do. We paid the contractor for the work. We sent the excess money back to the VA buyer because it was his money in the first place. And we got them a fantastic interest rate on a VA loan that he didn't even know he was asking for. So be careful what you ask for because you just might get it. If you want to learn more about the VA home loan benefit, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment below. I'll give you great access and great tips in order to get your next VA home loan.